All right. What is going on, everybody? My name's Jordan. I'm joined today by Andrew, and we are talking a little bit about some exciting things going on in the NBA DFS ecosystem here coming up this week for the DraftKings main slate on Friday here. I think that's March 1st. It will be a
It is.
no late swap slate for the main slate here. So DraftKings trying this out here. We've seen this attempted before with FanDuel in the past with like the lowest score is dropped with no late swap. I think the NBA contests have been a little bit smaller year over year than they were last year. I think maybe players sometimes getting a little frustrated with late swap, or you hear a lot of top players saying that the grind is a lot here. So I think they're trying something new. But as somebody that has made hours and hours of content about NBA DFS strategy, talking about how important late swap is, I thought it was important that we talk a little bit about this here, talk about some strategy, how no late swap NBA DFS might actually work here. So first of all, Andrew, what do you think about this here? Just high level, your thoughts on the no late swap.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think DraftKings has been trying a lot of things recently, especially with their contests and things like that. Like, they're running the big $4 150 max beyond the Micro Millions week.
Yeah.
And they carried that over. Now they're running like a $4 in the night slates too, on like some of these bigger night slates. So that's pretty cool to see them try new things. I think they did it like for MLB season, like late in the year, they started running like a $3 150 max. So it's nice to see them try new things. This isn't one of my favorite experiments that they're doing. I hate guessing.
Yeah.
And it feels so bad to guess. So I think that's like the biggest problem I have with it. So it makes for an interesting time. There's going to be some slate, if they did this long enough, where somebody get rules out and people are probably really upset with it. So I don't know how sustainable it is unless they start to shorten the slates up to like games have to be starting within half an hour of each other, and then run like even more classic slates than they even do now.
Yeah, and they've tried that too this year. That's been kind of going on, where the main slate will often just chop those two night slates off completely. I think the combination of this with that might be kind of an interesting combination here. I do think it's nice to see that DraftKings is kind of innovating this game. Like it's good that they're looking for ways to continue to make the game better, attract more players. Like I do like that part of it here. I do think too, on the strategy side, it opens up a little bit of a different type of edge. Obviously the late swap reacting to late news, especially with some of the recent features that we've added with contest sims reacting to live data coming in. It's all like very, very powerful for a player with that kind of tool in their hands. I do think there are some opportunities still to exploit what I expect the field to do in this type of contest. And I don't hate this idea overall. I'm actually a little bit excited. I have been slowing down my NBA DFS play quite a bit in the new year here, just because I got a little tired of having to play the late swap game every single night and having to commit to that. And be around, be available to do that. Even as easy as we make it on SaberSim to do that, it's still, something that you're thinking about here. I had slowed down my play, and I'm pretty stoked for this. And I think I would, if they ran this even like once a week, if Fridays became like a no late swap day, it would probably be something that I would be jumping at the bit to enter and play every week.
Well, I guess it's, people like you that they're targeting, trying to get
back
in the streets, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Cool. Let's talk a little bit about like how this works from a strategic standpoint here. One of the things that really jumped out to me about kind of what I think becomes important here is the spectrum of what a questionable player actually is, right? When you have the ability to late swap and you can just, shift your lineups at will, you don't really care about the questionable player that is 80 to 90% to play versus the questionable player that's maybe like 40 to 50% to play, because no matter who gets ruled out, you can react before that game starts. When you don't have that, I think that suddenly becomes kind of important here. And actually like spending some time to review the injury report and see who is questionable, like who are your biggest risks for players that are being out, and having a sense of how likely those players may or may not be to play becomes a pretty important part of the strategy. And I have some ideas on how I would go about doing that. I've been playing quite a bit of underdog daily drafts here this season, this new year, where you have like a pseudo late swap. You players that are out get removed for the highest ranked player that it was not drafted by any team. We don't need to get too deep into that. You functionally don't really have much of a late swap opportunity. And a big part of my strategy there has been reviewing the slate to look at the questionable players and kind of assess how likely I think they are to play. Before I go, too deep down that rabbit hole, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the only thing that popped into my head when you were talking was this is really all the NBA's fault for not making teams put out starting lineups sooner and letting them do it, 5 minutes to game time after lock starts. Every other sport does this hours in advance. MLB does it hours in advance. Inactives are hard 90 minutes to lock for NFL games. Blame the NBA. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, and on that note, I mean, for the players that are going to get ruled out after lock with no injury designation going into lock, that's going to happen. And I don't think there's anything that you can do about that. Strategically speaking, I don't think that can be exploited. Sometimes that's going to work out in your favor and sometimes it isn't. I think that's going to be an important thing to remember. Again, we're talking about one slate for now, but if this were to become a permanent fixture in NBA DFS or something like that, that will happen. And it's basically a coin flip if that works in your favor or doesn't, right? If you're over the field on the guy, it's going to suck a little worse. And if you're under the field, it's actually going to be a net benefit for you. But I think a lot of the strategy ends up coming down to how are you reacting to some of the questionable players here. So I will kind of talk a little bit about how I have been doing that here. Let me see if I can just kind of pull these up here. So, on a slate like tonight, for example, here, we've got a handful of questionable players here. And I think a lot of players that have been playing DFS throughout the season will already have started to build an intuition of what, these questionable players might mean for different players in different teams. LeBron, for example, is basically permanently questionable, right? He's like procedurally questionable every single game. Anthony Davis a lot too, not on this particular slate here. But LeBron's like permanently questionable here. A few of the things that I dig into when I start looking at some of these players here and trying to get a sense of if I think they're going to play are first, is the team on a back-to-back, and is this a player that has a history of playing back-to-backs, and what does that look like recently? A good example of that here is Zion, who basically up until this point in the season was playing no back-to-backs. He played a back-to-back right before the All-Star break or right after here. And the Pelicans are on a back-to-back here. Kind of an interesting case there where the entire season says one thing and then the most recent history says the other. Another thing that I think is kind of a useful component of this here is, and these are all rather than like one thing that you can look at and say, if X, then Y. These are like kind of all things that I use to build my case of why I think a player may or may not play, is the importance of the game, especially at this point in the season. What's the quality of the opponent? Is a team in the playoff hunt? Do they need to win that game? And nationally televised games, I think, matter a little bit here as well. The Lakers do play again tomorrow. They play the Wizards at home. They play the Clippers in LA Clippers. So kind of a bit of a weird one there. It's basically a home game on national TV tonight. Like, I'm pretty confident that LeBron is going to play tonight. And if you were to sit one of these legs of the back-to-back, sit the game tomorrow against the Wizards on a game that's not nationally televised here. Any thoughts? I don't want to just run away with this thing because I've got a lot to say because I've been doing this a lot here. Any thoughts on like what I just mentioned?
No, I think you're right. And I think it makes it like a little bit harder for
Mhm.
like some of the more casual DFS players who are like probably just like kind of signing on and like building lineups, kind of trusting the projections. Like,
Mhm.
you know, they don't really need to like look into like all the back-to-backs, like, hey, how many times has LeBron been questionable and then played? Because they can just late swap and then kind of update for it, right? So it
Right.
kind of causes you to like pay a little bit more attention throughout the year.
Mhm.
Because like I have that intuition as well. Like I can look at most of these guys and be like, okay, Gobert's been like dealing with an ankle thing, but like
Mhm.
I go look at his game logs, he plays the whole game. They've had 2 rest days. Like, okay, I kind of like deduce from that I think he's going to play or whatever the situation is.
Mhm.
Like you almost need to add that to your process if
Yeah.
you're not doing that now.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think overall, my sense on this is that you are still going to be able to get an edge in these games. It's kind of just a different type of an edge, and it's unfortunately one that's a little less automated than we currently have SaberSim set up, right? Like it has become so easy to have just like a huge advantage here when there's late swap to go in, run your lineups, enter your lineups at lock, then pick up on the live data and live news that is coming in throughout the slate and just update accordingly throughout the slate. Like it's automated, it's fast, it's efficient. I've talked about this a ton in our other videos. It is so good that I almost think there's very little else to do. Like there are things you could do by making, maybe making a custom field or, looking for things that the projections aren't picking up on at all. But I think part of the reason I'm excited about this is because it's an opportunity to kind of get your hands in the dirt a little bit here as well. Another thing that I do think is useful here when we're talking about assessing, the likelihood of these players playing is practice reports and shoot around reports can be very useful for getting a sense, kind of a little bit like we do in an NFL of when is a player practicing and did they make, morning shoot arounds, especially for teams that did not play the night before and are likely to have that full morning shoot around. That can be very useful as well here for getting a sense of if these players are likely or not to play. It I think is probably the biggest thing that you can do here with the no late swap is spending a little time doing this research and trying to just build. I think even if you're directionally correct, right, and you assume that every questionable player is 50% to play, if you can determine with some sense of accuracy, are they more on the higher than 50% or the lower than 50% side of that, it's going to help you out here. One other note I will mention that I do think is just a valuable resource for people that are maybe listening to this and are like, holy crap, I'm not going to be able to do any of that. Like, I don't know the NBA. I've been kind of trusting the other SaberSim videos and going through my process. I don't have an intuition for questionable players. The other live before lock shows that are out there from other sites have a lot of really great insight into this. Like, I think watching those and paying attention will be valuable. It is research that I think often isn't valuable because you can just update your lineups anyway with late swap. But when you can't, having somebody that is diving deep into this, help break some of this down can be useful for you.
Yeah, I like the point you made about like the morning shoot around. It's
Mhm.
it's almost something that's like not talked about that much in NBA, but is like really talked about. Like in NHL, you hear a lot about like morning skate is like
Yeah.
super important, and then like obviously practice reports, like, oh, did they play Friday? Did they practice on Friday? Were they limited? In the NFL, super important. But like, that just report hasn't gotten much love, maybe just because it's not as impactful. But like, hey, maybe you see that popping up like on your news feeds like more often, or paying attention to some of those sources. So I do like that idea.
Yeah. So one of the things that I am kind of thinking through, so once you've kind of done that research process here and look through some of the players and maybe have a sense of like who you think is or isn't going to play. I think there's a couple process things you can do to your build here to add some additional value. I think, first of all, one of the more exploitative edges that I think is going to show up is I expect most of the time players that are listed as questionable to come in under owned relative to whatever their fair, equilibrium ownership is, just because the risk there people knowing that they can't swap out of those players, I think they're all going to come in lower owned than expected. I also think the players that are most likely going to benefit from another player being out are also all going to be underowned, which is an interesting component of this year, because the projection models are not going to appropriately account for that percent of games where that happens. So like De'Aaron Fox, for example, is a good example tonight. If this was that slate, that game starts at 7 my time. That's well after lock. I think from my perspective, he's a legitimately questionable option here. Like he's dealing with a bit of an injury here. I think Fox and Sabonis on this slate, if there was no late swap, would both come in underowned. And much less even potentially the next guy up that would get Fox's minutes in this situation. Maybe a guy like Malik Monk, who, sometimes is starting anyway, but like, I think you're going to get both sides of that. You're going to have some ownership opportunities because of people afraid of that situation.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if I had to say like, hey, I'm going to play this and the approach I'm going to take, one, I would probably play less bankroll.
Mm-hmm. I think
because
that's a great
I
point.
I like to play super aggressive. So like I have to do this with my own like minute adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are times I'm like, I think that, maybe a guy's projected for like 26 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be like, I think he's like a lock for like 32.
Mm-hmm.
But what if I'm wrong? Right.
Yeah.
And Spencer talks about this Elusive Smoke in his interview with Andy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you don't need to be so right just in case you're wrong. You want to tame yourself a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I might think he's like 32 minutes and he's 26. I just might go halfway. I might just go like 29 and just try and be directionally correct.
Yeah.
And just be like, hey, I'm just trying to push the builder in the right direction. That way I don't end up with 100% of him or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you could like probably do something similar here where it's like, it's either you play the same amount of bankroll that you're used to and you play more safe, or you play less and you play more aggressive. And so for me, the way I would go with it is I would play less bankroll, and then I would make these hard decisions based on the research I've done. Like, okay, I think Fox is sitting tonight. And then I would X him, and then I would boost like Davion Mitchell, I think, who's his backup. And then, I would just be okay if it didn't work out. And like, but you have to play less in order to be okay with that outcome. If you're going to be super aggressive and start Xing questionable players and boosting their backups and stuff like that, because when you're right, you're going to be really right. And the field, might not have that same risk tolerance. But you just got to be careful with that super ultra aggressive approach.
Yeah. And there's an interesting spectrum there too, of like, Davion Mitchell's a perfect example, right? Like if Fox is out, he's going to be the kind of guy that everybody would just slam into their lineups, right? He would be like way underpriced relative to expectation. That would just be the slam, but he is unplayable without De'Aaron Fox. So you have this weird, like, what do you do exactly in that spot? And I think you could take, one way to look at this would be to, I'm going to make a decision on every single questionable player. And I'm going to try to play the slate, on each side of that here. I think you are kind of doing a little bit of like a questionable player parlay at that point, which can be a little bit tricky. I think for me, the way I'm going to be approaching this here is, looking instead, just taking the Kings, for example, is like, what is the set of players on the Kings that are kind of good plays either way, maybe the handful of players. And you could do this with like a test build, right? Like how many Kings am I getting on tonight's slate here? Looking at maybe even like the pool exposure. So like we have this set of playable players. Sabonis, a little bit of a weird, a low pool exposure there. I think he's always kind of playable, but you have this like set of players here. What I might do is, maybe bump up a handful of the players, like everybody, maybe even everybody, like all 6 of these players on this team, give them a little bit of a projection boost, but say something like, if Fox is in the lineup with a rule, don't use any other Kings, right? And well, I guess actually, yeah, let me think through this here. The point I'm trying to make, I'm not sure if the logic of that rule is right, is basically to put yourself in a situation where your lineups play one side of that or the other. So Actually, yeah, that is the way I would do. That is the right rule. So like if I'm playing Malik Monk, even though you might normally play Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox in a lineup together, just as an example, I want to set my lineups up in a way where I'm kind of like getting to play both sides of that in my portfolio. I have just the De'Aaron Fox lineups who I think, might end up being under-owned because of the questionable risk. But then I also have these other lineups using other Kings that will get the usage bump if Fox is out and are also probably going to be under-owned because of people underrating that risk. But I'm not doing those two things together. And that's how I think I would handle a lot of the players that I think are like legitimately questionable, where it's like about 50% of them to play, where I kind of want to gamble on either side of that. I do think the idea, though, of using a small portion of your portfolio to bet on players that would have an enormous jump to their projection if the right player is out is kind of an interesting idea there. It's something I hadn't really thought of until we talked.
Yeah, and you can easily do it with favorites, right?
Yeah, yep. Yeah, you could set up, kind of different conditional builds here where, maybe you're playing like this guy's, I want 5 lineups where I'm like specifically playing the Foxes out and add those to your favorites. And the nice thing about that, part of what can make this kind of fun is knowing that the late swap isn't coming and you're not going to have to blow everything up and kind of try to rebuild in like a 5 or 10 minute period of time does let you do a little bit more of that kind of stuff. I mean, obviously, there's always the risk. Like tonight is a good example of it's like 4 Pelicans questionable right now, like 4 key Pelicans questionable. That if we get the Pelicans like final starting lineup really late here, you might be blowing it up and starting over 10 minutes before lock anyway. But I think it, at least in theory, gives you a little bit more leeway to make more adjustments here and do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I know I was talking about like taking this super ultra aggressive approach, but like you just kind of put something in my head. I mean, honestly, like the truth is that there's a lot of different ways to get edge or like to get to a winning lineup. Mm-hmm. Like you could just like take all the questionables and just say like, hey, I'm just going to match ownership. And you just basically say like, regardless what happens, I just want to be neutral, whether X percent of my lineups sink or whether X percent of my lineups advance. At least it's the same, portion as the field will have. And I'm just going to look for edge elsewhere. So maybe you just take this super neutral approach to this super uncertain situation and just try and get, leverage somewhere else. I mean, maybe you don't even have to worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you'd actually end up probably playing a little exploitatively doing that, because I do think all those guys would come in a little bit lower owned than the ownership projections would indicate anyway. And I do think that's a good thing. Like, I think that's an opportunity to take advantage of there. That the Pelicans are kind of like a good example on tonight's slate, where it doesn't work because they're the first game on the slate and we will know who's starting by the time lock comes around. But let's say it wasn't here. Like, you could do something and say, I want to get like 10% Zion, 5% Brandon Ingram, 5% CJ McCollum, but put none of them in the same lineups as each other. Group them out so it's at a max of 1 to make sure they never show up together. And you have this set of lineups there where like all 3 of these guys, if any of them are out, are going to get a usage bump. So you're getting the projections weren't accounting for the usage bump, and you're getting the fact that players are going to be afraid to click on those names because of the questionable tag there. And you're trading, a percentage of the time where they're going to get ruled out and your lineup is sunk. But one of the things that, and this is why I kind of like this change. There are a ton of ways for your lineups to die in DFS. Like, I think late swap exists in this weird space of like, where, if somebody's player never even got into the game, it particularly feels bad. But like, if your player scores their 50th percentile outcome, like, you probably didn't get enough from that player already to win it, right? Or have that top 1% finish. Like, that's not 100% true, but there's so many ways for players to fail and for your lineup to die that, like, I don't think you have to be that afraid of a player getting ruled out, because lineups that have that player have so many ways to die anyway. Like, it's really, we are so much optimizing for first and top 1% outcomes that, like, it feels like it is just way overblown. And I think it's a little bit of like a cognitive bias even that people feel especially bad when their player got ruled out and they couldn't lead swap them out. But like, I don't think you need to be too afraid of that.
Yeah, I mean, just look at like, I was talking to somebody earlier about like just like cashing expectations, like top 20% cash.
Yeah.
If you have 20 lineups, you're mathematically expecting 4 lineups to get across the cash line, like just 4. And, that's with late swap. You know what I mean? So yeah, there are a ton of different ways for your lineups to die for sure.
Yeah. The Wolves are another interesting example for tonight here. Like we don't have the Friday slate in front of us here. So I think and I'm sure you're probably going to get a ton of questions on office hours about this too. So you can get ready for that. But like another example here tonight, and it will be interesting to see how the field plays this as well. Where we have like Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert, both questionable. Also both with injuries. I think, this is kind of an interesting one where this team played last night. Towns was out. Gobert played with an ankle. He played 39 minutes. And Edwards got hurt in the middle of the game, went to the locker room, then came back and then also just like crushed and went way over his projection. So they're also playing the Grizzlies. That was another thing. I think I might have mentioned that. If I didn't, I should have. This is a home game against a bad opponent where they're favored by about 10 points. Like, I think that's another factor in determining if these players are likely to play. But to me, these two are both legitimately questionable here. That's how I would kind of designate them here. Weak opponent, back to back, both, with an injury here. Wrapping around to the point I was trying to make here, I am curious on how, if this was a no late swap slate tonight, how owned Towns would be. Because I think, on one hand, my intuition is that because the projections are not appropriately accounting for what his projection looks like if both Anthony Edwards and Gobert are out, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Like I have this weird gut intuition here that like Towns might actually, if this slate were happening with no late swap tonight, might actually come in a little bit higher owned than expected. What is your gut feeling there?
I think teams with more than one questionable, people will be more comfortable playing because like they kind of have a couple of different outs to get to
that's
their
a good
value,
point.
As opposed to like just like one kind of standalone questionable where if they're wrong, then they're basically like very wrong.
That is a really good point.
Like my gut reaction.
Yeah. No, I agree. I can see that happening here. So, any other thoughts on this in terms of just, strategy, high level takes, anything we didn't really get to talk about here?
No, I think I covered like most of the things that I'm mostly concerned about here. It'll be interesting. Like, like you said, like, hey, Fridays, people like to do stuff, does it become like an every week Friday thing? What do the lobbies look like? Are these contests going to overlay? I'm like super interested in seeing how some of that would work out.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm definitely going to play this slate just because I'm kind of interested to at least get the opportunity to use it as a case study and see especially how ownership works out here. I would say, as people are maybe kind of getting ready for this slate or trying to figure out what to do here, I would say, one, spend that time looking at some of the questionable players and trying to, get a sense of if you think they are likely to play based on how often they are questionable, how often they sit when they are questionable, what the like game situation is, if they played the night before, if the game is nationally televised, the quality of their opponent. There's a lot of like little hints you can find there. I do think players, both questionable players and the most likely beneficiaries of players, are likely to come in a little bit under-owned here. So I think there is a little bit of an opportunity to exploit that bad ownership. And I do like the idea of grouping these players out. I think that is something I'm likely to do here, so I can try to set my lineups up in a way where I am playing lineups that like have the success in both ways. Like the Kings, again, a good example tonight where maybe I have a Sabonis and a Fox group, or a Fox and no other King group here, that kind of thing, just so I can I can make sure that the lineups are kind of set up to succeed on either angle. So, but a lot to think about. I'm sure if this ends up becoming a more frequent occurrence here with DraftKings, we'll have other videos talking about this more in the future. But I'm pretty excited about it. So we'll see how it all goes.
Last thing I was thinking about is that, just to be clear, like our ownership projections are not going to take into account the new format.
Yeah.
So you could expect the ownership projections to be as if they were in, from the beginning, and it's not going to account for like people shying away from these plays if they're like on a later time slot.
Yeah, and the projections too. It's worth noting, like Fox in our sims tonight is not simmed as having sitting however often he's likely to sit, right? Say it's 50% exactly to play. It is not 50% of the time he's sitting in the sims. It is assuming that he's playing his normal workload here. And I think that's probably true of almost all other models as well. It would be interesting to see, and probably something we'd be talking about internally as well here, if this ends up becoming something that DraftKings does more in the future, how models might actually adjust to that on slates where that becomes important. I think we could probably do some creative things there with ownership and actually the sims themselves, of trying to like sim in questionable risk. Having a play-by-play sim that does that and a contest sim that does that would be pretty neat. Like building your lineups and then contest simming them, assuming Fox sits half the time with accurate ownership projections. I think that could actually be really interesting. But
I'll leave that one to Matt when he solves it. He can come on and talk about it.
He's probably going to be upset that I even mentioned that here, because now that's going to be wish listed over and over again. So, all right, cool. Well, as always, if you guys watching or listening along have your thoughts or questions for Andrew or I, or just want to kind of talk about how to approach this as it comes up here this Friday, the NBA channel in our Discord is a great place to do that. And if you are watching this video here and you found this because you are trying to get ready for the no late swap slate on Friday, and you haven't used SaberSim before, we have a free trial on our site. 5 days, SaberSim.com. You can come check us out, build lineups, run the contest sims, all of that good stuff. So, Andrew, thanks for coming on and talking to me about all of this. And for everybody listening along, we will see you later.
Absolutely. Thanks.